G'day guys, this is due to a question. You'll have to blame Llama for this. This is question or sort of my answer, so I don't end up with a long stream of points, comments and stuff like that. Sort of originated from questions and comments in regards to the dark side of fasting. So I said I might as well clear up, because I sort of realized that there's a bit of misunderstanding of a number of these processes, what's happening in the body, you know, the related ideas that people have of a number of things, these sort of processes. I mean, we sometimes hear autophagy, apoptosis, necrosis, tissue necrosis, all these sort of things. And we've got, you know, what are these things, you know, mystical sort of states of organic, cellular matter. Very interesting. So let's get on with it. Let me just share my screen. So this is the video that I made back on the 15th of January 2020. So it's a bit old, it's dated. Actually, I think it may have been made a bit earlier. I may have updated it that day. Can't remember now. Anyway, don't hold me to it. You know, I know people love to, oh, you slipped up on this or slipped up on that. We're human, you know, get over it, build a bridge, want a new pony to ride. Anyway, so it was in regards to, I'll actually fire up that specific location and remind myself what I was saying. Had a diet which has been quite damaging to the body for a prolonged period of time and has very high levels of senescent cells, there is always the risk that those senescent cells that may be quite damaged or even precancerous could potentially survive, you know, due to fasting. You know, especially if they've already established themselves for some time and they haven't been cleared out by the immune system, there is that risk. It's usually the risk is much higher when somebody actually has cancer and it's metastasized, and in those sort of circumstances, it's probably not the smartest thing to do. It's far better to actually deuterium deplete, get your fat levels much higher, lower your protein levels, and try and basically, you know, fight it that way by supporting oxidative phosphorylation and actually re-establishing and rebuilding. I'll discuss this in a. Anyway, enough of myself. Bored already. It's the thing, you know, with your past self, you can get bored. Anyway, so that was basically that part. Sounds, Llama goes, you sound as if not fasting would remove senescence. It's not exactly what I was saying in that regard. Do you mean to say that the immune system is temporarily suppressed? Not what I was saying either. In that regard, in specificity, you know, we're talking about a lot of damage, stuff like that. Certain people are going to have a lot of health issues and stuff like that, probably derangements of all sorts, including the immune system. There's going to be a lot of different things at play, and they're going to vary between the types and all that. So you can't give a generic answer to these things, let's be honest. Then I've seen people drinking green tea while fasting. Are they giving themselves cancer with EGCG? I didn't claim that either. You know, so EGCG is something which can be used as a hormetic. The quantity is very low in green tea anyway, so it's pretty much irrelevant. Now, I did show in the Pfizer senolytic video that basically when you do include supplemental, like large doses of EGCG, forget about the hormesis, because you can do exercise to get hormesis, but it actually increases senescent cells. It overstresses the body and a number of cells and can actually cause them more oxidative stress, which is not a good thing. So there is certain level, but this sort of unnatural sort of exposure to excess amounts of these types of polyphenol type compounds, these plant compounds do have negative effects, and they've been shown in the literature. That is why I don't recommend it. But having green tea is not going to cause you any problem. The dosage is extremely low. It's not concentrated like in a supplement. So it's an irrelevancy completely. Then there was some other thing about non-cancerous damaged cells survive in order to become a risk. Why would fasting contribute to that? Well, let me put it this way. What fasting does, it can actually protect cells. That means all cells, including cancerous cells. So when cells go metastatic, it's usually recommended you don't fast, because fasting, like, look, once cancer cells go metastatic, as I've said before that I did my cancer, I'm not going to cover that right now. I've covered it in my cancer video. What happens is cells are out there to survive like any others. They will use anything. They'll use ketones, fatty acids, glucose, the lot, lactate, anything you think about energy source, it will use it. You know, they're not discriminating characters, cancer cells. They will use everything and anything. And fasting can actually, you know, in the early stages before they go metastatic, in the very early stages when you've got senescent, precancerous and that sort of stuff, you could actually stress them sufficiently with a ketogenic type style diet and cause apoptosis of those cancer cells. That's been shown as well in the literature. But once they go metastatic, then it's a different ball game. They can actually use that fasted state to basically, because they still can access all sorts of things in the system. They're growing exponentially and they are suppressing certain things. And that is really important in that regard. There was conversation here about CD38 as well that sort of came up, things that Paul was asking and stuff like that. It was related to CD38. And I did mention other things like, I mean, seed oils. I mean, a lot of us have seed oils in our system. So we're not ancestral. So basically when you're losing fat or you're basically, you know, fasting, and you're not going to have any issues other than you may be releasing, you're not going to have any issues with other things, but you may be releasing a lot of free fatty acid that is actually damaged from your fat stores, which basically means that that can actually cause more mitochondrial damage. Not a good thing. That is why I've always recommended low dose vitamin E as an electron donor to deal with that when you're losing weight and you've had past indiscretions. You know, so these are all the things. An ancestral person that stored fat or engaged around or cycle by eating fruit seasonally and stored fat, that fat is basically converted into palmitate. It's a very stable form. And it means it's not going to cause these issues when you release it for energy use. But when you've stored a whole lot of toxic stuff into your fat cells, that's a different story. This is why I've always said my approach is very different to many others out there. I usually recommend when people are doing either fasting, prolonged ones, or short ones. I'm not too phased about that because you're going to be in a low carbohydrate sort of state. You've basically got upregulation of glutathione, which you can actually electron donor and recycle vitamin E and vitamin C. Not a problem. But when you do prolonged fast, you will be pushing up the levels of free fatty acids. You'll be pushing in far more quantity of basically this sort of stuff. That's where it can become a problem. So I do recommend when people go, before they go into a long fast, they sort of up their vitamin E, get their vitamin E with a low dose vitamin E for a period of time, and then go into the fast for those specific reasons. So there's specific, and the sort of the Jarrow form, which is a complex, the sufficient vitamin E in the system to basically be recycled by glutathione and be used for that electron doning to stabilize that sort of that stuff that's coming out. So there's all these sort of nuances. It's, you know, unfortunately, because we've damaged our bodies in a number of different ways, it's complicated stuff. And as I've said, even here, CD38, the good, the bad, and unknown, because it depends on the damn circumstances. Yes, it basically has, in its normal state, it has basically a sort of, you could say, it downregulates NAD, plus it has sort of a protection against senescent cells going rogue. But, you know, at the same time, CD38 enhances proliferation and inhibits apoptosis in cancer cells. So you can actually see that basically by affecting mitochondrial function. I'm not going to go into this study, but what I'm saying is that CD38 is an issue. And so there are a whole lot of multiple pathways which, you know, and as I say, the devil is in the damn detail about these sort of things. How, you know, I haven't, you know, covered a lot of this sort of stuff. My attitude is that you need to lower the deuterium level. You need to try and get cells to function properly. That's the key, you know, the key point that I make is get the cell to function properly. Get basically, you know, improve and re-establish oxidative phosphorylation, even in a cancer cell, by turning it back into a senescent cell, by clearing out the garbage, suppressing all these other pathways. And people can go and look at the cancer video that I've actually done about that information. I'm not going to go over it here. That's not the purpose of this video. And it's basically to look at things like, you know, once that cell gets back, then you can use Pfizer and things like senolytics to clear it out. You know, so that's the sort of idea. Now, let's go into the other one, which is really important, just so we can cover those points to clear up a lot of the confusion that is still bloody out there about these things. Okay, so these are the different states that cellular your cells may be in. They may be in that they can actually undergo. They can undergo. Okay. So let's just go down. I'm not going to, and look at this. Autophagy, high survival. Necrosis, low survival, obviously. So when we're talking autophagy, we're talking about healthy cells that are clearing out garbage. That's what we're talking about. Healthy cells are basically, by doing fasting, we're clearing out and maintaining good cellular function. So those cells don't become senescent, don't become damaged or whatever. That's the whole purpose of fasting. Once a bloody fasted and they're actually rogue and all that, it's a different ball game. We don't want to get there. But once somebody gets there, there are different intervention approaches, which I've discussed in my cancer video, which I won't go into. And then after that, once you've got yourself into remission, then you can use senolytics to try and kill off this sort of stuff. That's where using senolytics for apoptosis. Okay? Because basically, remember this video, remember CD38 inhibits apoptosis. So if you've got a lot of cells that are problematic, you know, and too much CD38 because you've got too much senescence in your system, well, you may not be able to do this very easily, even with fasting. Got it? So apoptosis in a healthy person will happen not naturally. A cell is too damaged, the body will remove it. But if you've got too much senescence, which a lot of us do because of a lot of indiscretion through our lives, let's not forget, then you've got these inhibitory effects. And it depends, it varies because you've got CD38 actually expresses around, it creates cytokines and all that, and actually affects more the closer cells around it. So if you've got like a liver and you've got, you know, let's say something up here, it's going to affect the cells in that locality. You know, it will damage those more than anything further away in that regard. Not that you can't actually get, but it will be primarily the ones that are close by where they'll take that onslaught, so to speak, from these inflammatory markers that are actually produced. Really important to understand that. So that's another reason where if you've got a lot of damage, you try to have to keep it clean with a low inflammatory diet. So you don't increase the damage, and then slowly using senolytics, you can clear out a lot of these damaged cells over time. These are different processes. Because if this was, see, people confuse apoptosis with autophagy. Autophagy is not apoptosis. It's not killing the cell. It's cleaning it up inside. Got it? It's a different process. Can you imagine? You go to fast, all your body does apoptosis, you no longer exist. Let's be serious, you know. That is why cells are in very high survival states when they can undergo autophagy. If they're very damaged, they're in very low survival state. They can't undergo autophagy. Okay? They can go into the necrosis state. And necrosis state is basically, you know, a state where it's uncontrolled, unregulated, sort of, you know, a state of death where the cells are literally just fucked. You know, I mean, that can happen because of hypoxia in a certain area where you can get necrosis. There are certain infections and other things that can cause necrosis. There's a lot of things that can cause necrosis. We've known skin type lesions and stuff like that, and sort of bacteria that can cause necrosis. There's a lot of things that can cause cellular necrosis. That's not the purpose of this. That's just to basically explain some of the differences. So, and program necrosis, sort of somewhere state in between, but we're not going to cover that. These are the key things, because these are the distinct characteristics: apoptosis, necrosis, and autophagy. That's pretty good cells. Your healthy cells will do that. They will do that. That's the purpose of them, to do that in that regard. So basically, what have we got when we're talking about those sort of things? We're talking about cells that are basically literally looking, you know, are clearing out garbage inside. Okay, that's what we're talking. You know, sort of apoptosis. It's a sort of a response that the cell chooses to kill itself, in a sense, to survive, you know, from serious illness or disease. So there are cases where the immune system will attack a cell that's been infected with some sort of virus or some sort of thing and kill it off, basically, you know, to prevent the further spreading of that disease, that sort of stuff. So that's why you get a lot of damage in your lungs if, you know, any respiratory infection, you know, stays there for too long. You get sort of this glassing effect, a lot of damage to the actual cells. It's like a severe sort of apoptotic effect in there, you know, especially with a cytokine storm, which really can actually undermine a lot of your then capacity to exchange gases, and that can kill you, you know. So there is a purpose in clearing out damaged stuff that gets damaged from viruses, bacteria, or just general living and stuff like that. We want to clear that out. We don't want excessive amounts of that happening. That can happen under certain circumstances, like viruses and stuff like that. So these are the sort of things, but basically the difference between these two here, is one is basically we're talking about, I'll just unshare for a sec. One thing we're talking about is, cleaning up the garbage. The other is basically killing those things off, just so we can make that quite clear, because everybody's got this sort of strange idea, I'm going to fast, I'm going to kill off a whole lot of cells. No, you're going to clear out a whole lot of cells. Now, some cells can be apoptotic, but it's if you're, let's say, don't have the right nutrients, the right sort of stuff, in play, well-regulated immune system, it becomes a bit more difficult, and I'll explain soon. Now, let's just continue in this regard, just to further down. Oh, gosh, dropped it. Yeah, we're not going to go into the biochemistry of these processes, but yeah, as you can see, these sort of things: oxidative stress, growth factors, deprivation, DNA damage, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what are we talking about here? We're actually talking about autophagy is self-degradative process in response to various stresses, like fasting, like exercise. That's why even exercise can do autophagy, including nutrient deficiency. Yes, fasting. Organelle damage, hypoxia, reactive oxygen species, the stress, drug treatments. Yes, they can also cause some of this, where the body needs to. Process of autophagy involves 4 key steps: nucleation, initiation, nucleation, fusion of autophagosomes and liposomes. So these are small molecule type proteins that are basically think of it in terms of pulling apart organelles inside. These are and in that regard, because it comes from the autophagosome, something that eats, in a sense, is a way to describe it. Okay. I think that's how you can. So my translations with my Greek stuff and all that. Yeah. That's, yeah. It's a sort of how can I put it? Yeah, well, it is a part of the catabolic process. Yeah, it's a sort of eating and degrading the components inside the cell. Okay, so, and this is sort of using cholesterol to build. It's the whole process, sort of rebuild stuff and all that. So you've got these processes of pulling apart all the stuff, and all the clearing out the stuff and all that sort of stuff. And this is basically using cholesterol esters to sort of rebuild that sort of stuff, this sort of process that is going on, trying to keep it very simplistic, as you can understand. Now, so we've understood that. I'm not going to cover apoptosis or necrosis. So that's just people can, if they're really, really interested, they can look at this sort of thing. Now, things that influence this, obviously, apoptotic events involve the immune system. Remember what I talked earlier in that video. Okay, now let's look at this stuff. Vitamin D mediated apoptosis in cancer and obesity. Low vitamin D status has been associated with increased risk of several cancers and obesity. Concurrently, obesity and cancer have been linked to impaired vitamin D status, obviously, because when you're too obese, you store too much away, which means you deprive your capacity to have stored available vitamin D. That's the reason for it. It's not, more fat cells, more storage of fat soluble vitamins. And that goes also for retinol, MK4, and all the other, can be a problem, obesity. And that's why you find a lot of deficiencies. And that's why people that are very morbidly obese, you sort of may have to increase initially those things if they're still in that state. But if they're losing weight, that's okay, because they're going to be releasing shitloads of it. You don't need to supplement them because they've got plenty stored. Let's put it that way. So ketogenic diet would sort that out and would give them the fat soluble vitamins that they've been putting away and storing away in their fat cells for a very long time. In both cancer and obesity, selective elimination of cancer cells and adipocytes can result, that's fat cells, can result in decreasing tumor size and a long-term reduction in adipose tissue, that's the adipocytes. These effects can be achieved through the induction of apoptotic cell death. Vitamin D derived hormone 125, so the active form, not the stored form, but the active form, triggers apoptosis in epithelial cancer cells and mature adipocytes via induction of apoptotic calcium signals. That's calcium. Remember what I've said before? A lot of people that are getting like COVID or having the mRNA crap, they are triggering all these different sort of strange and wonderful past infections. Well, what do you think the body uses? Vitamin D uses calcium to suppress viruses in the soft tissue. Yes, that's how it's done. So when you're vitamin D deficient, yes, some of this stuff can come back out and play havoc. Yes. So we definitely, that's why we're seeing a lot of this long COVID stuff and a whole lot of effects due to vitamin D and maybe even a calcium deficiency or the wrong signaling. That means the inability to, without sufficient, so you can put as much calcium as you want, as the repeat people will tell you to, but without good enough vitamin D, not going to work, boys, not going to work. And vitamin D will bring more in from the animal foods anyway, so it's pretty much irrelevant what those cockwombles talk about. Anyway, let's move on. I shouldn't have used that word. Oh, God, it's going to be demonetized. Oh, God. Damn. Prolonged increase in concentrations of intercellular calcium signals functions as an apoptotic initiator and directly recruits apoptotic effectors. So dependent, when we're talking about effectors and stuff like that, we're talking about, you've got a whole lot of enzymes that are basically activating for a lot of these processes as well. So, calcium and vitamin D are playing cofactors, just to keep that in mind. We don't need to go into the details. We just to keep that in mind. Pinoprotease, cancer cells, adipocytes. Apoptosis link in cancer and obesity supports the rationale to include vitamin D components, modulating intracellular calcium and calcium-dependent apoptotic protease as promising targets for discovery of new therapeutics and preventive agents for cancer and obesity. The concept of maintaining and increasing vitamin D status for protection against cancer and decrease adipocytes also warrants further evaluation. Yes, whatever. So just to give you an idea, obviously they're talking about, you can use it to basically get better vitamin D status. You can use to shrink fat cells. You would have to go, that's a different thing. I haven't gone into it. It was for another video, but anyway, I might as well bring it up here quickly. Yeah, that is sort of because you've got a lot of fat cells. As you're going to be losing weight, you need to worry less about that. But obviously, if you're let's say a big fat person and you're still on a mixed diet, you're still engaging into somewhat the Randall cycle, you can force a bit of more free fatty acid out And you could probably waste some of that as energy through uncoupling and all that. But that's another kettle of fish, another going down another little avenue. So there's another study that talks about the cell cycle and apoptosis and all the other sort of related effects. More information in regards to vitamin D apoptosis, again, in cancer and stuff like that. I will go to this as well. Oops, we covered that. Now, the good, bad, and unknown. And this is the thing with, I've talked about how it's got protective effects, but under different circumstances, it can be also problematic. It can be a bad boy as well in terms of cytokines and stuff like that. This is where vitamin D also comes into it, because it can temper down the cytokine effect of CD38 as well. Because it regulates the immune system, it can actually temper that down and suppress it slightly, while not affecting the underlying effects of, increased apoptosis as well, clearing out some of that sort of stuff, which is another factor. So, you combine good vitamin D status with senolytics, you're going to get better results in the long run. These are the sort of strategies to be used. And that's why I'm very careful with certain things, especially around cancer. When people have cancer, the sort of strategies that I use, I don't use fasting, especially if the cancer has progressed quite a bit, because it can actually be protective. For that reason, there's a lot of research in that area as well. CD38, even in infections. Now you understand why Sean Baker's right when he says these fat people who are really unhealthy have more problems in terms of infections. And not only more problems in terms of infections and infecting people as well, it's because they've also got more damaged cells. That means that are expressing CD38. Exactly. Anyway, that's the sort of cover that point and all that. I'm going to make more videos on this sort of stuff to really, cover other aspects in terms of these different elements. But the take-home message is, do not fear green tea, but I wouldn't waste my money on it, basically. If I want basically to hormetically stress myself, I'll go and do some exercise, or I'll get into a sauna. I'll do something which is natural rather than take something which, is not required. It does, we get enough senescence. Sorry, we get enough stress in our lives, hormetic stresses. We don't need to add to them. Keep to the office-based stresses, your work-related stresses, your family-related stresses, your exercise stresses, and all that sort of stuff. They'll give you enough hormesis for a lifetime. We don't need all this other. You're wasting your money, and potentially could be making things worse by giving yourself too much hormesis. Excess hormesis is unhealthy as well. So let's stick. Traditionally, people out there, they weren't drinking green tea. You don't see a Maasai drinking green tea. Got it? They're out there hunting, and that exercise that they do, the Hunza or the Maasai going out there hunting the cats and protecting their livestock and moving them around and stuff like that. That gives them enough hormetic stresses. And then they're earthing themselves. Fantastic. Greatest antioxidant is to earth yourself. Exactly. These are the sort of things we really need to do. All this other mumbo jumbo nonsense and, people, oh, you need this and you need that. No, you don't. What you need is to understand these processes. Most people think that autophagy is some sort of, knocking off cells and stuff like that. No, it's not. It's clearing out junk. So you're clearing out all the damage, and these organelles are going in and clearing it all out. Okay? You know, that's what they're doing. Those are autophages and the the sort of lysosomes and phagocytes. That's it, phagocytes, isn't it? You know me with my down. Ah, you know, autophagosome. Gotcha. Yes. So basically, that's that sort of stuff. Those organelles go in and do that sort of stuff, and then basically, you know, the other part, the hydrolyzation, is basically, you know, using cholesterol ester to fix the stuff in there. You know, you've cleaned it up. You know, let's fix it. Get it back to doing its business, providing, you know, good cellular function for that tissue, whatever it is, and, you know, the mitochondria providing the energy and keeping it all happening and all that. That's how the body's supposed to work. And so fasting is good, don't get me wrong, but under, you know, cancerous conditions, it can be problematic, depending where you are, whether you're at the early stages or later stages. Sometimes even the middle stages, it's a bit, you know, I would rather flood the body with a whole lot of deuterium depleted water or fat to clear out their deuterium levels, and to try and actually slowly, and even use a bit of melatonin and stuff like that, to try and actually repair the mitochondria, try and restore energy production in those cells, to sort of force them to downregulate the oncogenes, go back into a senescent state, and then use senolytics and vitamin D to snuff them out. Yes, fantastic stuff, both of them. Or just sit in the sun and lather yourself with fisetin. Ah, yes. Anyway, I hope that sort of demystified some of this sort of stuff. And I hope you enjoyed my little take, my comical little take on that, entertaining. So yeah, so pretty much that. If people have specific questions clarified, I'm not going to give you long answers. I hope this sort of differentiates this sort of thing between those sort of things. Necrosis, if you don't understand, basically cellular necrosis, I think that was quite clear. Cells are dead at that stage. They're damaged by something, you know, whether it's bacteria, whether it's whatever, although they're so damaged they just go, or they're not getting oxygenation. If you don't understand that, I can't help you. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I will move on. Thank you for, and I hope you enjoyed this little rant in regards to, you know, people's concerns about these issues. Don't be. And don't waste your money on tea, green tea. It's a waste of money. A lot of this sort of garbage is, oh, it does hormesis. Stick it up, yeah. Exactly. That's where it belongs. It's that sort of crap. Anyway, see yous.